Okay, we're going to begin session number 2, and we're going to hope that we have no technical issues. We have had a couple of those issues in the past, so welcome to those of you who are watching this recorded or are here live. If you are here live, know that you may interrupt at any point for a question. You can also pop in and out of the session as you're like. This is supposed to be convenient for you. So if you need to pop out of the session or watch part of it live and part of it recorded, that is totally up to you. So let's start. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. There we go. We're going to share my whole screen with you. And I'm going to start over here at the beginning. Last week, Module 1, I started by giving you an overview of how Indiana Tech and the new Canvas works. I'm not going to do that again this time, but I did have a couple of questions, so just going to refresh your memory. Remember that there are 2 toolbars, right? So there's this one over here, which is for the institution itself. And there's the second one, this more interior one, that is only related to this class. So you can get confused. You can go back and forth between the 2, but don't forget that there are 2. And there's a lot of ways of accessing stuff. But again, I want to remind you, you could go directly to modules and click on individual readings, right? So let me show you what that looks like. If you went over to modules, okay, so I'm clicking on this module stuff. You could go directly to a reading. So let's say you wanted to go to this reading in Module 1, reading Introduction to Primary Research, Observations, and so on. You can do that. But if you don't start at some point by starting up at the overview, you're going to miss things that you don't want to miss. We're going to be doing that today. So I'm going to start with Module 2 Overview. And we're going to kind of walk our way through this module. Indiana Tech writes these classes, these online classes, so everybody that takes the same class gets the same material, different professors, but same material. So you are going to be getting exactly the same thing that anyone else taking this class is getting. They always start with an overview, kind of give you the whole process, and partly that's so that you can plan your week. We know these classes are very intense, that you all have millions of things that you're doing, including work and life and other classes and all kinds of other things. Some of you are live on campus, some of you are all online. But keep in mind that online courses require a good amount of work per week. 5 or 6 hours is not uncommon, especially if you are a slow reader. It might even be longer than that. So take a look at what you have planned each particular week. This week you can see we have a lot of readings up here, which you need to start probably already in the week. Seeing as how we're doing our live session on Tuesday, you've probably already started by doing the readings from Monday or Sunday or Monday. And then, of course, you've got journals, multiple journals, discussion boards as always, and then a project. So this is what they always suggest for pacing. I, as always, have a little bit of a bone to pick with that. One, the journal number 1 discussion board post is always due on Thursday. That's your initial post. You read and plan something, you post it. They always make the post replies to your peers due on Sunday. But of course, the project is due on Sunday also. So if you are not replying until half an hour before the project itself is due, it doesn't help anything, right? Your peers can't read your comments and do anything about them, and you can't read their stuff and think, oh wow, I didn't do that, I need to do that. So I highly suggest that you do this initial post on Thursday as they suggest, but then do your peer reviews on Friday or Saturday. At the very least, at least do them early in the day on Sunday so somebody has time to take a look at your suggestions and implement them. Okay. All right. So again, as always, when you're starting at module 2 and you're starting at the overview or wherever we're starting, you then take a look at it and then go down and find this little next button down here. Okay. So we're just going to walk our way through this one. You first have a reading, ethnographic writing and context. And I wanted to pause a minute on that one. If I can find what I want to show you. Let's see, where is that? There we go. All right, so this is what that reading looks like, putting ethnographic writing on context. Big word. English people like to use big words, but it's also a type of writing that you may not have heard of. And you may be thinking, well, I'm never going to use this again, but actually you might. This ethnographic writing is often used in business applications. Although we call it something that anthropologists do, so I decide I want to live in Paris for a little while, so I want to understand the culture, the setting, what's going on, and I do some ethnographic analysis. You also can easily see by looking around your own communities that we have many different communities that we live around and in, right? And you're starting to notice that by choosing your own little group to do an analysis of, right? So we have cultural differences for sure. So I might not speak Spanish, but I can see that my neighbor speaks Spanish. They probably have different ways of doing things than I do. That's one way of doing it. But also there's other things like different faith points of view, different points of view about whether I should pick up trash or not. Some people believe strongly that if they go camping, that when they put their tent on a particular piece of property that is going to be for where they live for a minute, that when they pick up that tent and they roll up their sleeping bags and go away, that they have to leave that spot in a better place than where it was before. So they go around, they pick up all the trash that they've made, but they also pick up all the trash that might be there from somebody else. That's one way of having a viewpoint. Other people obviously have different points of view on that, right? They don't mind tossing cigarette butts or trash or whatever. So there's going to be different points of view on nearly everything. And that's kind of what you're investigating. What are these different points of view, and how can they be useful to you in your thought process of surviving, living, making a life of worth, right? Which is always our goal at Indiana Tech. So I'm not going to read this article to you, but I want to point this out to you. This is what it looks like when you click on it. And then I want to pause for a minute because most people just don't understand the point of ethnography in business. And I wanted you to get a better idea of how you might be able to use this in your own particular useful way at work. So I brought this is a 10-minute TED Talk that delves into what ethnography can do for you. So let's listen to this. And then we'll get back to the lesson. Hold that thought for a minute. I'm going to make it a little louder for you. If I can. There we go. Trying again.
A blinking cursor waiting patiently for you to tell it what to do. If you wanted to see your files, you would type LS for list, and then it would show you your files like this. They'd all look the same, even though some might be text, some might be images. But now, if you want to see your files, you just open up the folder and you look. And you can see some are text, some are images, because they look that way. If you wanted to move a file from one folder to another, you would type MV for move, the name of the file, isaacsfile.doc, and then something like .. talks, which is the location of the destination folder, local, relative to the current folder. Now, you drag the file from one folder to another. We take this visual display of our files and folders for granted, but somebody had to think of that. At a time when everybody who used computers typed those kinds of cryptic commands, somebody had to first notice that this wasn't so easy, and second, think of a better way to do it. Someone had to think that you could draw little pictures of files and folders on the screen and manipulate them by dragging a little box around on the tabletop. Well, those people were Doug Engelbart and Alan Kay. Engelbart invented the mouse, and Kay invented what's called graphical user interface. At the time, Alan Kay worked at Xerox PARC in California, which is where I work today. And in 1971, he said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that's what he did. So this is at a time when computers looked like this. Giant boxes of technology and big rooms hooked up to these terminals, which is where you type those commands. They were very expensive, so you had to share them, and people would sign up for time on the computer. So it's not surprising that at a time like this, Ken Olsen, the head of a very big computer company called Digital, said, There's no way anyone would want a computer in the home. Somebody had to think that you could take all that technology and compress it into a little box that would sit on the desktop, and it would be dedicated to just one person's use. So that's something we all take for granted now, but at the time, that would be extravagant. Well, those people worked at Xerox PARC, and in 1973, they invented the Alto, the first graphical personal computer. And that led to the Apple Macintosh, the IBM PC, and now all the slick desktop, laptop, and tablet computers that we all use today. So we're here today talking about the best of what Broadway can be. And I think that the reason that I was invited here is that the organizers were hoping that some of that magic from the early park scientists is still lingering in the halls where I work, revealing to me a vision of where you will be in 20 years. Well, I'm afraid that hasn't happened, but there is one bit of park magic that I can share with you, and it has to do with a method that you can use to figure it out, called ethnography. So let's go back to the 1980s when a Xerox copier took up an entire room. There was another park scientist, Lucy Suchman, and she had the idea that maybe if you're building technology for people, you should watch them using it. So she decided to watch some people using a Xerox copier. She grabbed a couple of her colleagues from down the hall, and she asked them to make copies. So I'm going to show you a short clip of a video from this historic video of these two people making copies.
Place 1 to 50 originals. For women, I have 100 originals. Face up. Place all originals against the left wall. We want two-sided copies. Unload top paper tray. Now, do we want them collated? What? Reverse order the originals? You gotta be kidding. This is definitely a bug. Press start.
Does that relate to that?
Unload top paper tray.
That's not this. That's not the paper tray. It doesn't say what the paper tray is. Huh?
So our first batch
First,
is SOL.
what is that?
Should have.
Well, we sure did come up with a lot of paper.
So it turns out that those two people from down the hall are world-renowned computer scientists. One of them went on to win the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in computer science. So clearly the problem is not that the people are dumb, the problem is with the design of the copier. Today, it is now common practice for companies to do what's called usability testing. But back then, it wasn't done. Lucy Suchman had to think of it. And she went further. She realized that you could observe people, not just to figure out how to make their products easier to use, but also to figure out what products to build in the first place. So this practice of observing people in their natural environments to understand their needs is called ethnography. At the time, it was an academic practice. It grew out of anthropology. Lucy Suchman was the first one to apply it to industry. So even today, not everybody uses ethnography. Most companies will try to understand their customers' needs by asking them directly using tools like focus groups or surveys. But asking people to tell you what they want gets you only so far. As the anthropologist Margaret Mead said, what people say, what people do, and what people say they do are entirely different things. When people do their jobs or just any ordinary activity, much of what you do just becomes invisible to you. It's just what you do. But if you watch people, you start to realize a lot of times people are working around their tools. And it's these gaps or problems people work around that are opportunities for innovation. The thing is, a lot of times when you point them out to people, they'll say, well, sure, it's obvious that's a problem, but they don't think to tell you about it when you ask. To notice it, you have to get out and watch. So I like to think of my job as an ethnographer like this. You sit and you watch the chaos that is human behavior. And if you're patient and you watch for a while and you have a naive state of mind, you start to notice insights that are obvious after you point them out. You start to notice the hidden obvious. Well, how does this work? What is ethnography like? Well, let me give you two examples from my work. So the last couple of years, I've been studying parking. Now, I realize parking is an odd place to go looking for technology opportunities. But we all know, New Yorkers especially, the parking is an area where there's a lot of problems and a lot of needs not being met. So to study parking, my colleagues and I have spent a lot of time hanging around on street corners, watching cars parking, trucks unloading, enforcement officers giving tickets, and we've seen a lot of things you might expect and some that you might not. the things that we started to notice gradually was the parking signs and how difficult it can be to tell the one thing you want to know quickly, can I park here now in the few seconds you have as you're driving by? So I'm going to show you a sign for about that amount of time, and I want you to figure out, can you park here now? Let's say it's Wednesday, early in the morning, it's 7 a.m. Can you park here now? Okay, let's look again. Okay, this is hard, not just because there's so much going on, but you'll notice that Wednesday is not mentioned and 7 a.m. is not in any of the time ranges. So you have to infer that because it's not covered, you can park here, at least to the left of the signs. Okay, here's another one. It's 3 p.m. Can you stop here now? Okay, let's look again. So the bottom sign says no parking at 3 p.m. So that implies that you can stop. And the top, no stopping sign doesn't cover 3 p.m. So that applies again. You have to figure out that you can stop here. Okay, and here's one more where I challenge you to figure out what you can do here at any time. So the problem here is that parking signs focus on restrictions. Know this, know that, when what you want to know is what you can do. Now, when I say it like this, it seems obvious. But when you ask people to tell you what are some of your problems you have with parking, they generally don't go complaining and saying, parking signs are difficult to read quickly as you drive by because they focus on restrictions. To really understand this, you have to get out and watch. And it can take a while. Because we were looking at so many different aspects of parking, the signs didn't really come into focus for us until the fourth city and over 1,000 photos and videos. Once we noticed it, it was obvious. So what could you do about this? Well, one thing you could do is redesign the signs. And so here's one possible way you could design that second sign. And if on the right, you see it's organized by time of day, from morning through night. So at any time you can find now, and then you can just look to the right and see, can I park? Green, yes. Red, no. Orange, there's some kind of restriction, like here it's deliveries only. And if you want to be kind to internationals, you could include symbols. Okay, so that's one example of how ethnography found an unmet need. Let me give you another one. So we noticed a lot of times when we were out looking that there were a lot of loading zones marked by yellow curves that weren't being used. Here we are looking for a parking spot, and it's just loading as far as the eye can see, and not very many trucks using it, and yet we can't park. On the other hand, we saw a lot of times when trucks were trying to make deliveries and couldn't find a loading zone. And since they have to park near where they're going to be delivering, they get creative. So they double park, and they block in cars, both diagonal and parallel. They park in the median, blocking cars from turning left. They park in the crosswalk, blocking people from crossing the street. And they park on the sidewalk. So the problem here is that loading zones take up precious parking resources, and yet they don't really meet the need. Again, I point this out, seems obvious, but when we talk to people about their parking problems, they don't say loading zones are inefficient, they say there's not enough parking. So what can you do about this? Well, what you really like to do is to have the spots for loading when they're needed and then make them available to everyone else when they're not. So this is something we're doing right now. We have built a prototype parking meter that can change its state from parking to loading, no parking in other states. And since trucks have GPSs, they have GPSs and they know where they're going, we can take a spot and change it from parking to loading, and then when they come and they park, they can put it back to parking. Okay, so what does all this have to do with Broadway? Well, what I'm trying to say is that, well, I don't know what you need to do to make Broadway the best it can be. You can get some ideas by using ethnography. It's a very general tool. We've used it in many different domains: hospitals, nursing, call centers, retail stores, young people using mobile devices, lots more, and you could use it on Broadway. So you could accompany a family as they're spending a day out on Broadway. Or you could watch someone as they're planning a day or an evening for a night out and a show. Or you could just hang out at the tickets booth and watch people buying tickets, or people checking into hotels, or people choosing a restaurant, or window shopping, or going to a show, all those things. And maybe if you're patient and you do it for a while and you keep a naive state of mind, maybe you will discover the hidden obvious. Maybe you'll be the one to think of a novel idea that people will take for granted in 20 years.
Okay, just a second here. So I really wanted you to see that. I think that does a fantastic job of.
Offline abroad, I still do have schoolwork
well,
to do, like
hold on.
papers and assignments. So I'm currently in my third year of university, and I'm a business major. So
Don't want
Grammarly
to
still
hear
comes in.
anymore right now, do we? Okay. Okay, going back over here. I really wanted you to see how ethnography can be useful for lots of different things, right? So you're observing behavior, you're observing a grouping of people, and then one of the things you're going to be doing next is making some sort of a judgment call or an analysis or a question. So let's go forward. This is another reading that you have called Walk, Talk, Cook, Eat, a guide to using sources. So backing up a little bit, I wanted you to get to meet the author here. This is Cynthia Haller. And Cynthia does a quick little thought process on analysis and synthesis. So we're going to listen to her for 5 minutes and hear her kind of talk through this particular idea.
Today we'll be looking at how to analyze and synthesize the source material you read. How is analysis different from summary, paraphrase, and quotation? In the last unit, you looked at how to do summary and paraphrase and quotation to accurately represent what a source has said. Summary, paraphrase, and quotation simply represent what a source says. They do not comment on it. But when you analyze, you elaborate on, consider the implications of, and/or critique what the source says. In some ways, summary, paraphrase, and quotation are like the objective annotations you've been doing, whereas analysis is like the subjective annotations you've been doing. When you synthesize, you connect what one source has said with what another source has said, and or connect what one source has said with what you yourself are thinking. Again, summary, paraphrase, and quotation simply represent what a source says. They do not comment on it. Here's an example from the genetically modified food source you read for this module. The original source says, the most common modification adds a gene from the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, BT. As the GM plant grows, it develops a poison that kills pests, such as bollworms and stem borers. Here's my paraphrase. A gene from the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, BT, can help a plant kill off pests like bollworms and stem borers.
I'm going to pause that for just a second because she's talking about a different subject than what we're talking about, but the same idea, right? You're going to be using sources. Your source that you're doing by observing is what we call a primary source. The source that's staring in front of you is a different kind of source, right? This is a source that someone else wrote, someone else did the research on, and this person is paraphrasing or using it. A little bit more.
And then my citation, my in-text citation, genetically modified food, 2010, para 6. The last slide, we looked at a simple paraphrase of the passage that we considered. But analysis elaborates on that paraphrase, considers the implications of it, and or critiques what the source says. So here's the paraphrase again. Here's some analysis. Not only am I paraphrasing, a gene from the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, BT, can help a plant kill off bollworms and stem borers, but I'm also elaborating on that, saying the following part, which makes the application of pesticides for these pests unnecessary.
Okay, now again, I'm going to pause for just a second because what she's saying here is important in the sense that there are multiple ways that you are going to be utilizing a source. You're citing from a source, you're paraphrasing a source, you're analyzing a source. Analysis is something that we continue to work on from different angles. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that she is using APA format for this in-text citation. If you are used to MLA format, which is probably what you've used in the past, you note that in this citation that we're looking at here, the MLA uses the last name of the author and the page number. In APA, we we use the last name of the author. In this case, there isn't one. There isn't one, so they're using the title, genetically modified food. That's the same in MLA. Author's last name. If there is no last name, then the title. But there's an additional thing here the APA does, and that's this year that the thing is published, right? That's included. So last name of the author, or the title if there is no author, comma, date that it was published, year, comma. Right here, there is not a page number, but they are instead saying paragraph 6. That's another way you can do that. But you do need to include paragraph number or the page number if there's one available. Okay, so I just wanted you to see a little bit of what that looks like. All right, so that's Cynthia Holler. You will be opening that up and reading a few pages of what that looks like. So that kind of leads us into our next thought is databases and types of sources. We want to know a little bit more about what these things are. So we are going to take a look at the video provided. What is a library database and why should I use one? So again, you are going to be doing primary research by observing. You've already done some. You're also going to be using library databases for other types of sources, and that's what this looks like.
As a university student, you'll be asked to do library research for a paper or a project.
But what does...
Let's see if I can get you a full screen part of that. Here we go. Better.
As a university student, you'll be asked to do library research for a paper or a project.
But what does library research mean, and where do I start?
Library research at the university level means finding the works of scholars using library databases. Your professors will expect this of you. After this tutorial, you will be able to explain what a library database is and why you should use one, explain why searching a library database is different than searching the general internet, and you will be able to list the 2 main types of library databases.
So, what are library databases?
Library databases are where students and scholars search for scholarly articles, other academic publications, as well as news and magazine articles. They are different than Google. Most of what you find in a library database is not free. The library purchases access to hundreds of databases to support the university. There are 2 main types of library databases: specific, or those that search specific disciplines or areas of study, and general, or those that search across many disciplines.
Are they easy to use?
Not always, unfortunately. You will need to learn some new skills to search them effectively. General databases are usually easier to use than subject-specific databases, so start with those.
How do articles get in a library database?
Scholars share knowledge with other scholars by writing research articles. These are published in academic journals. Instead of buying access to each individual scholarly journal, libraries purchase access to databases. Library databases let you search many journals at once.
Okay, I'm convinced I need to use library databases. I have access, right?
Yes. The libraries provide on and off-campus access to our databases for current students, staff, and faculty.
Great, but if there are hundreds of databases, how do I choose?
First, you need to know what you're researching. You should have some sort of idea what you want to look up. Are you an undergrad working on your first research paper? Choose a general database like MinCat or Academic Search Premier. These search across a lot of different disciplines or areas of study, so you'll likely find something for your paper. Grad students, faculty, or undergrads getting further into their majors could start with a subject-specific database like PsycInfo or PubMed. These focus a search within a few disciplines or areas of study.
So let me get this straight. Library databases are where I can search for scholarly articles, other academic publications, as well as news and magazine articles. There are 2 types of library databases. General are those that search across many areas of study, and specific are those that focus on just a few areas. I will find articles that are vetted by other experts in that discipline, so I know I'm getting the good stuff, and my professors know it too.
Perfect. And if you need help choosing a database or getting started, ask a librarian.
Oh, and let me reinforce that. The librarians have masters in library science degrees, and that means that they have an expertise that a lot of people don't have, including myself. So when I want to do some research, I often find myself asking the librarians. Let me give you an example. I had a student recently who was trying to do some research, struggling in these databases because they're trying to find something about lawyers. They were trying to figure out if they wanted to go into law school. And they came to me after an hour of searching. They're so frustrated. They're like, I can't find anything on lawyers, and that's ridiculous, right? So I refer them to the library. The librarian, now again, you can ask a librarian. Let me pull it up here so you can see that, because it's really helpful. Okay, so if you're on the Macmillan Library site, okay, that's what it looks like. So you could be there, you could actually be live there, but you might not be. You might be on your computer, and you might be looking at it something like this, right? How do I do this thing? Notice that there is a chat here. If this chat button little box thing is here, that means somebody is there, right? So somebody is going to be there to answer your question. So that means you could pop over there, ask a quick question, and pop back out, right? Notice when the librarians are available. They are here. Notice that there's other options. Let's say there's no chat box here. That means there's nobody sitting there because it's 2:00 in the morning. There's going to be another way to do that, and that'll be by sending them an email. And then when they wake up and get there in the morning, they're going to be there. So notice there's ask a librarian, contact us. There's all kinds of different options. You have stuff that you can do if you need help. And what happened was that student went to that librarian and said, help, I can't find anything that says lawyer. And the library said, oh, well, that's because it's not under lawyer. It's because it's under attorney. Student went back and went attorney. And of course, lots and lots of things popped up. So don't forget that librarians are really useful for all kinds of things and intended to save you time, energy, and frustration. Okay, so no. All right, now when you're going through this, you're going to find, of course, that there is this one video that says it's private and you can't get to it. So I'm going to show that video to you in case you're having trouble getting into it. And this is like, what is a scholarly journal? How do I know if it's scholarly or not?
To find a scholarly journal article for a project or a research paper. Awesome, no problem. But wait a second, what is a scholarly journal article? How is it different from a popular source like a newspaper or a magazine article? Good question. Let's break down the differences. Scholarly journals enable scholars, experts in a particular academic field, to communicate their research with other experts by publishing articles. It also allows them to stay current by reading about other scholars' work. Consequently, scholarly journals create a community of experts who are all participating in a kind of conversation in that academic field. Rather than a face-to-face conversation, this is a formal conversation, which takes place over months and years through these scholarly articles. The most important part of this long-term written conversation, what makes it a scholarly conversation, is what's called the peer review process. The peer review process works like this. In order for a scholar to get published in a scholarly journal, his or her expert peers must first read their work and critique it. These peer reviewers make sure that the scholar has made valid arguments and that he or she has cited appropriate experts in the field to support that argument. This is why you may hear scholarly articles referred to as peer-reviewed articles. The terms are often used interchangeably. This rigorous evaluation process ensures that scholarly work meets a higher standard than popular publications, and it allows other scholars to rely on these articles for their own research. So, why is this important for you? First, the information in a scholarly text has been carefully evaluated, so it's more reliable and credible than information in popular sources. Second, reading scholarly journal articles for your projects can give you insight into professional argumentation and research practices. And finally, every scholarly text has an extensive bibliography that will introduce you to important texts in the field, which you can then use to extend your research in that area. When you read these articles and books that the scholar has cited in his or her article,
I'm going to pause on that for a second. That's really important. The source that you find that's good, go to the end and it's going to give you more sources that are helpful, right? Another thing there, Wikipedia is often frowned upon as a source that's a main source. But I often start at Wikipedia to get an overview of a particular topic. So if I wanted to find out about ethnography, for instance, I might go there and look at the reference in Wikipedia for ethnography. If I scroll to the bottom of whatever source thing I'm looking at, I'm probably going to find a list of sources or references. References is the APA way of doing it. Sources would be the MLA. So either way, they're going to be the same. You're going to go to the end and look that up and go, oh, look, here's a whole bunch more sources. Fantastic, right? So whatever thing you're researching, when you find one good source, it's kind of like gold.
You are taking part in the scholarly conversation and getting leads to additional sources for your own work. Okay, so where are these scholarly articles hiding? Let's say you're in a research database and you only want scholarly articles. How do you do it? In EBSCO's Academic Search Complete, you check the box for scholarly or peer-reviewed journals before clicking the search button.
And even though you're starting in the Indiana Tech Library website, you're going to find that is the same, that looks very similar, because you're going to be using EBSCOhost for Indiana Tech 2.
Limits the search results to materials found only in peer-reviewed publications. Note that some material in these publications, such as book reviews and editorials, may not be peer-reviewed. To make sure, click the article title and check that the document type is an article or journal article. Other research databases have similar features. For more information on this, please ask us.
Okay. So that's helpful, right? I will post that video so that you can find it again should you want to take a look. You obviously can't from here, right? Okay, there is a great handout here. Definitely take a look at that. That'll help you sort of evaluate whether something is a journal article or not. Now we want to open up the Writing Center research question. Okay, because that's what you're going to be doing next. Just a second here. Okay. All right, research question. So you're doing these observations of people, of groups, and then they ask you to come up with a research question. Well, what is a research question? So remember, on one side, you're making the observation. On the other side, you're making the analysis, right? So you had those little charts. This is what your observations and your analysis are kind of helping to lead you to, right? So as the woman who is doing the parking research, she's observing the cars parking and the trucks parking, and then making her observations and then making her analysis. Okay. Notice it took her, she said 8 weeks or so long of observing before she realized what the main and obvious problem was, right? The signs are marked, but they only mark in very unclear ways as to where to park, and you can't see it as you're driving by in a second. How do you make it better? Well, you can make it better by structuring those signs in a different way. That's what the research question ended up being, how can we make this work better? So your research question is going to be something different, right? So what is it? Well, it's clear, it's focused, it's concise. It's complex in that you don't want to ask a question that has a yes or a no as an answer, right? It needs some sort of how or why component. It's also arguable, right? Its potential answers are open to debate. You're not going to argue about is the sky blue? Although I know if you're a science person, you can argue because it's really not blue, it's really reflection, blah, 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 right? So maybe in a science sort of way you could, but in most ways, if I say the sky is blue, people are not going to argue with you unless it's from an oblique angle. You don't want to say something that's obvious. Okay, so now how do you do one? How do you develop one? Well, that's what you're going to be doing over the next week or so. You're going to first choose an interesting topic. That's helpful. Most of you chose a topic or a group to observe that you found interesting. If you're really bored with that, you may want to, at this point, change to a different one. You're going to do some preliminary research. Well, that's the stuff about the library, right? So now that I have some observations about my group, I want to go and see, has anybody else done some research on this group or these people? Go look at some journals, go look at some periodicals, go look at some newspapers. You're going to consider your audience, right? So who is the audience you're writing to? Well, obviously I'm here. Obviously your peers, because you're going to be posting to them. So who are my audience? What do they want to know? Why are they interested in it? Ask a lot of questions, right? Ask yourself how and why questions a lot. Why? So example, why were slave narratives effective tools in working towards the abolition of slavery? Well, you don't want to ask how or no. Like you wouldn't say, were slave narratives effective? Well, that would be a yes or no answer. You want to say why or how, right? And then you're going to evaluate that question. So once you've come up with a couple of questions, you're going to evaluate them and ask yourself, is this clear? Is it focused? Is it complex? Can I answer it with a yes or no? And then you're going to do more research, right? So this is where this writing center research comes in. So read that a little bit more carefully, and I think that will be helpful in trying to figure what you're doing. Next one here is reading games, strategies for reading scholarly sources. I am not going to read this one, but this one's helpful in trying to figure out, like when you're looking at something scholarly, it's not easy, right? It's a lot of little dense print and your brain kind of goes, oh no, I want to see some pictures. So this will give you some strategies as to how to do it, how to skim effectively so that you're looking for things you need to look for. One big tip for looking at something scholarly is to look for the abstract. By the way, the abstract is something missing in several of your paper project number 1. So in APA, you have a cover page, and then you have the next page, or sometimes at the bottom of the cover page is what we call the abstract. That is a quick summary of what's in the work. So don't forget that next time around. And then you start the actual paper. Okay, so now we're to the stuff you have to do. So of course, discussion board post number 2. This is a peer review. So while you're drafting the interview questions for project number 3, so you're going to be finding someone to interview. Don't forget we talked about that early on. You now need to find someone from the group that you're looking at that will be okay with asking you questions and recording. You're going to be recording them. Remember, there is a paperwork that you'll need to have them sign so that they're okay, to show that they're okay with being interviewed and recorded. Because you're going to be submitting those, right? You're going to be submitting both the recording and the submission of their approval. Don't forget to do that. Then you're going to be writing these questions. What kind of questions are you going to be asking these people in Module 3? So that's what you're going to be doing this week. What am I going to ask this person? So that's what you'll be posting. And then this is a really useful. So once you post your questions on the discussion board, then you'll be looking at other people's questions will help you to go, oh, that's a really good question. I should ask that too. So that sort of brainstorming and interactive amongst you will be very helpful. So that's what you'll be doing there. And then you're going to be doing also project 2 essay rough draft. Okay, note that will be at least 500 words. That's 2 pages-ish. In Microsoft Word, it's easy to tell how many words you have. So here, let's show you how you do that in case you don't know. Let's open up a Word. I'm going to open up a document that I have been writing. It won't mean anything to you, and you don't have to read it, but this is a document that I've written. If I want to know how many words are here in whatever Microsoft Word document I'm looking at, I go up to the Review tab. See the Review tab up here? Okay, so once I've clicked on Review, then over on this left-hand side, I'm going to go down. So spelling, thesaurus, word count. Okay, now the word count at the moment is only going to say 16 words, and that's silly, but that's because I have inadvertently highlighted some little part here, right? So it's telling me there are 16 words in the thing I highlighted. So now I'm going to take that off. I'm going to go look again. It's going to say, oh, I have 549 words. So that's how you can tell 549 words is about this much. So a little bit into page 2. Okay. All right. So that's how you can tell what it looks like. Okay. Keep moving here. Okay. Journal number 3. There are 7 questions you're going to be doing. with ethnographic writing. So that ethnographic stuff that we took a look at, these are 7 questions for you to answer about those. Ethnographic writing includes more than observations. Based on what you learned, what is it? And then the essay mentions consent forms. So you don't have to collect them quite yet, right? But you're going to be too. But what, in your own words, define ethics? What does that mean? And number 3, in Haller's text, the character online professor states, quote, a bigger problem with internet search engines, though, is that they won't necessarily lead you to the sources considered most valuable. What on earth does she mean? So again, you're going to have to do the reading maybe more than once, kind of think about it before you get to the part of answering these questions. Number 4, using the critique model and examples provided, break down project 2 into ingredients, processes, product. So this is you thinking this product through. Number 5, drafting your research question. It's not perfect at this point, clearly. You're still like drafting it. That's why it's a draft. So you're going to, be doing several iterations of this, no doubt. You'll be thinking, okay, what do I want to know? Why do I want to know this? How does this work? Number 6, after reading the article we just kind of skimmed through, Reading Game Strategies, answer the following questions. Locate a source that you're going to use in your annotated bibliography. Eventually, an annotated bibliography is fairly simple. It looks very similar to a references list. Again, references are APA. So at the end, you would have a references and then your list of sources alphabetically. An annotated bibliography is similar. So you list the sources alphabetically. Beneath each source, you include an annotation, and that is a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs of summary about what's in the source, which of course means that you have to not only find the source, but read the source so that you can make the annotated bibliography eventually. Okay, so describe your process. How did you find it? Where was it? Was it scholarly? And then number 7, using the Purdue OWL, cite the source using APA format. Okay, APA. We'll post some more APA stuff. Okay, so again, you're looking at stuff that is currently due, which is intended to help you with stuff that is due in the future, right? So you're doing both. Journal number 4, this is an observational log and report. You're changing the topic this time around, but again, asking for a similar thought process where you're doing an observation log and report. You can find the link there. You can also find it within the module in the list. And the project itself. So let's take a look at this project. Okay, so project 2, a virtual discourse community. Now notice virtual means online. Your first one was a live one, right? You went somewhere and you actually watched live people. Here you're going to be doing it virtually. Your second project is adapted from something called primary research and writing. You're again conducting an observation, another form of ethnography, and learning about a discourse community, only this time it's going to be online. And you're also going to begin this time adding secondary sources to help you with it too. So first you'll observe the digital community and write a 4 to 5 page argumentative essay about it. So I saw this thing, this is what I noticed, this is my research, these are my questions. You're collecting qualitative and quantitative information about this people that you're looking at. You're going to launch a review of the literature. That means you're going to be collecting sources for an annotated bibliography that we talked about. Again, remember that you're participating in a conversation. You yourself are going to be providing information and thoughts to this other community, right? You will be including at least 3 scholarly sources. That's what we just looked at. Scholarly means peer-reviewed in your eventual essay. But you're going to be reading other stuff too, right? So you can read lots of other things that are not scholarly. Don't forget about that also. And you will conduct this observation online, of course. Okay. So you'll have another observation log, that double entry one, on one side is the observations, on the other is the thoughts or the analysis. You'll be doing the secondary and primary research and then drafting your essay. There's always a rubric at the end here. You've noticed this probably before. Rubrics are really provided for you. So before you turn something in, you've done everything, you want to go to the rubric and you want to ask yourself, did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do this? They're intended not to give you a bad grade. They're intended for you to go, oh no, I didn't do that before I turned it in. I'm going to stop and I'm going to go back and I'm going to rectify that problem. And then I'm going to turn it in, right? So the rubrics are intended sort of a checklist for you to remember that you've done everything. Okay, again, you're going to find that right there so you can print it out for yourself if you want it printed out. Live tech reflection is what we're doing right now. And that concludes everything in the module. So I'm going to go back over here to modules and notice that what we've done is scroll down to module 2. We've started with the overview and we just kind of click next all the way through. If you want something specific, of course, you can come here and click directly to it. So if you need to find these things, again, it's easy to do. At the bottom, you'll find all the assignments that are due. But if you start with just the assignments and go just there, you won't have done the reading that you need to do ahead of time. So notice you can find them, but also how and where. Okay, so I will be posting the video that we're recording right now, but I'll also be posting the videos that I showed you, the links to those in the announcements, should you need to find those. So I haven't heard anybody jump in. So let's kind of go. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Does anybody who is here live want to jump in and ask a question? A lot of information, huh? Jennifer, yeah, go ahead. If you want to speak with your mic on, you can, or you can type it. But go ahead if you have a question. You may have to turn your mic on, though. Ah, there you are. Hello. Good to see you. So you might have to take your headphones off or unplug them just so that I can hear you. Help you. Let's try that. Did that help? No. Well, you may have to type it as a question, and you can do that and send it, or if you want to email it to me that way, and so you don't have to. Here, I'll try. I'll make you the moderator. Maybe that'll help you. Try now. No, I don't know. Technology is wonderful and not at the same time. So you can, let's see, where do you type these questions? You can do the public chat. It's over on the left-hand side up at the top. Oh, so the question, how do you indent paragraphs, right? Okay, actually, let me share my screen and I'll show you. Okay, let's go back over to a Microsoft Word document here. I'll just pull this up. Okay, so this is a business document that you see. So you can see that there are no indents here because they're done in block style. If I wanted to indent, I would put my cursor, so you can see I put my cursor right here in front of the word the. Then I would look down on my keyboard to where I see tab. And that's, for me, it's on the left-hand side of my keyboard. And I just hit tab and it indents just like that. So you only need to hit the tab once. And that will indent your paragraphs. Does that help? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, Yeah, so you don't have to do anything more than that. So there's just a difference between what we call college writing, which always has the indents, and then business writing has block styles, but then which is no indents, but then there's extra spaces between the paragraphs. So. And you ask what is the topic to write about for discussion 2? And let me see if I can still pull that back up. So number 2, going down here, journal. Okay, so discussion board post number 2 is the one where you are posting your, let's see here, let me read it to you. Submit your project 2 rough draft. So that's going to be that project 2 that I took a look at. The one that I saved. So let's see if I can show you where it is. Let me go back here and share my screen, make sure you can see it. There's that. Okay. All right, sharing screen. So when you are here and you go down to module 2, you'll see at the bottom here, these activities and assessments. So discussion board post is there. But if you want to see project 2, which is the rough draft for it, that's where it is here. So just click on it. And right here, there's an attachment. You can, it says project 2 CPS. You'll want to open that up. That's the one I opened up. And then you'll probably want to save it someplace where you can find it a little easier. At least that's how I would do it if I were you. Because sometimes it's great to go through in an organized fashion for module 2, but then later on you're like, where was that? I can't find it. So that may help you. So when you see project 2 under module 2, that's where you're going to find that. You're still frowning though. Still confusing. Let me go back over to the chat here. Yeah, so what I would do is I would print out the project 2 first. And I would take a look at it today and read it through a couple of times. And that's what you're going to be writing a draft about. Now, and once you read it, you're going to see, okay, there's multiple things I need to do. And I'm going to be working on it this week, but also next week. So this week is just drafting week, okay? Next week we'll be finishing. So don't panic about it because it feels like a lot because it is, but it isn't all this week, okay? So that's where you're looking at a discourse, an online discourse community. So it could be a gaming community if you're a gamer. It could be Facebook or Instagram or whatever you do that you want to observe. Okay. Okay. I have one more minute before our stuff will end and our video will end. Is there any last questions you want to ask? Thesis statement. Yeah, so a thesis statement is going to be something that you're working on. And that's really going to be something along the lines of, this is the discourse community that I'm looking at. These are the questions that I'm going to want to ask about them. So probably you're going to want to do an observation first before you come up with what it is that you want to focus on. You might, like if you're focusing on Facebook, you might see people argue a lot for no particular reason. Why do they do that? So, maybe that's the question that you want to go with. Maybe on TikTok, it would be something totally different. Like, why do they do all those stupid things? I don't know. Whatever question that you come up with, do the observation first, and then that you'll have a better idea of what you want to talk about. Okay. Okay. Our time is up. If you think of something else, though, email me and I will check that between things and answer your questions. Okay. Okay, cool. Good to meet you, Jennifer.